Okay, so the domain and range of a quadratic function we're going to talk about. But first, let's review what the domain and range of any function is. So the domain of any function is the set of all possible x values. So for a quadratic function, actually, the domain is all real numbers, always. There are certain situations where we'll talk about in word problems where the domain may be something different based on context, but in theory, always quadratic functions have a domain of all real numbers. And when we talk about range of a function, we're talking about the set of all y values. So for a quadratic function, the range is going to be determined by the maximum or the minimum value. So we're looking to the y coordinate of the vertex. In an upward parabola, the range is y is greater than or equal to the minimum value. But in a downward parabola, the range is y is less than or equal to the maximum value. So when we look in this picture here, we have two examples that we're going to go through. When we look at this one over here on the left, this example, what we see is a downward parabola. So with this downward parabola, I'm going to point out the vertex right here, which looks like it's 4, 9. But what we want to pay attention to is this y coordinate here, which is 9. So remember, we just said in a downward parabola, the range is y is less than or equal to the maximum value. So the range here is going to be y less than or equal to 9. And of course, like we already said, the domain is all real numbers. So we just write all real numbers. So we're done with that example. Now let's come over here to this example over here. All right, when we're looking at this example, this is an upward parabola. And we already said that the domain of all quadratic functions is all real numbers. And the range of an upward parabola is always y is greater than or equal to, in this case, it's going to be our minimum value, which is just beyond -6. So we'll say approximately -6.25. And this is an approximation. So remember that whenever we're talking about the domain of quadratic functions, it's always all real numbers. But when we're talking about the range in a downward parabola, it's all dependent upon the maximum value when it's downward. And in an upward parabola, it's all dependent upon the minimum value. Hope that helped you understand domain and range.